Onde tem cultura, a Vale está. No poder criativo que nasce dos palcos, orquestras, das artes, das ruas e dos museus. Na valorização das diversas identidades brasileiras e na preservação de memórias. É valorizando a cultura que crescemos e evoluímos juntos. Instituto Cultural Vale.
A inteligência artificial não consegue definir em uma imagem do que vão ser feitos os próximos 100 anos. Porque o futuro não vai ser feito de uma imagem só. Vai ser feito dos que dizem sim, de quem não aceita um não como resposta e de quem pergunta, por que não? O futuro será feito de você, que assim como o Itaú, é feito de futuro.
Ministério da Cultura e a Associação Casa Azul apresentam 22ª Flip, Festa Literária Internacional de Paraty. A Flip conta com benefício da Lei Federal de Incentivo à Cultura, PRONAC 235060, e possui acessibilidade para pessoas com deficiências física, visual e auditiva. Tem patrocínio Master, Instituto Cultural Vale. Patrocínio Ouro, Itaú, CCR e Suzano. Patrocínio Prata, MAC Móveis, Eletronuclear, O Globo e Sesc. Patrocínio Bronze, Sebrae e Globo Livros. Parceria institucional, Prefeitura de Paraty, Secretaria Estadual de Turismo do Rio de Janeiro e Museu do Território. É uma concepção Associação Casa Azul. Realização, Ministério da Cultura, Governo Federal, Brasil, União e Reconstrução. Obrigada e boa mesa. Flip, o encontro da literatura com a cidade.
A minha história foi sempre atrelada ao mar, né? A gente está todo dia ali trazendo alegria, felicidade para as pessoas durante o passeio, né? E as pessoas estão num momento de lazer, de descontração, então eles também procuram não estar estressados, né? Se você for considerar que nós temos 90 praias e 65 ilhas, então boa parte do território, inclusive da população de Paraty, ela se encontra nesse local, né? O mar é uma grande via, assim, até porque tem muitos amigos que eu só encontro no mar. E Paraty, como todo mundo se conhece, né? Então, às vezes a gente está na correria do dia a dia, ou passando de moto ou de carro. Hoje em dia, dificilmente a gente anda a pé igual andava antigamente, né? O pessoal tinha mais tempo. Agora, todo mundo, a impressão é que a gente trouxe um pouco isso trouxeram um pouco isso da cidade grande, está todo mundo meio que com pressa. E aí no mar não, né? Então a gente está sempre encontrando os amigos, passa, bate a mão, né? Eu costumo dizer que meu trabalho assim é uma das coisas que eu faço que é mais prazeroso no meu dia a dia, né? Eu fico estressado quando eu não tenho trabalho, mas quando eu preciso sair para o mar, para mim é muito gratificante, é prazeroso, assim.
Flip, o encontro da literatura com a cidade.
Bom dia, Paraty!
Good morning, Paraty.
A gente chega agora na nossa
Now,
14ª
this is
mesa,
our
chamada
14th
O Amor
roundtable
Político.
called Political
Eu tô
Love.
muito feliz porque
It's
desde o
such a
começo eu
pleasure
já
to have
tinha
you.
que ter uma mesa
You know,
sobre
I
amor,
thought we had
porque
to
como a gente
have a
aprendeu
roundtable
com a
about
Bell
love
Hooks, o
because, as
amor
we heard
é
yesterday,
jeito de
love
resistência
is a
ao absurdo
resistance
do mundo, é o
to
melhor
all the
jeito,
absurdities
o
of
único
love, and maybe
jeito
the
de
only way
resistência ao absurdo
we're
do
able
mundo.
to resist
Mas
all the
quem, como eu,
absurdities
achou
we're
que a gente ia
living.
esperar até
But
aqui pra
if we
falar do
thought
amor,
that
se
it would
enganou. Eu
take
me enganei,
this
pelo
long
menos,
to
né?
talk about love,
O amor
we're
apareceu na mesa
mistaken.
de
We saw
abertura
in the
com
opening
Simas, na
session
mesa
with
sobre a
Simas
diáspora com a
on the
Eliana Cruz,
African
Eleonora
diaspora with
na mesa da
Eliana
Lisa
Eleonora,
Ginsburg com a
also
Ana
Liz
Maria
Ginsburg and Ana
Carvalho,
Margarida.
e na
Also, we
mesa
talked about love,
incrível
and in
de
the
ontem à noite, que
amazing
era para ser uma mesa
roundtable
sobre guerra e
last week that was
destruição,
about
e o amor
it was
também
supposed to
estava
be a
lá.
war and destruction, and
Bom,
love was
falando
also
sobre amor,
there.
eu não posso de
So,
agradecer
once
mais uma
referring to love,
vez a
once again, I
todas
would
as
like to
pessoas que
thank all
fazem a
those who are
Flip,
part
essa
of
turma
Flip, this
maravilhosa, o pessoal da
amazing group of
técnica,
people, or the
da
technical
produção,
people,
os anjos, os
production, the
designers, a
angels, the designers,
comunicação,
communication,
os
the
intérpretes
interpreters,
de
the sign
Libra,
language interpreters,
o pessoal da Flipinha,
all
da
those
Casa de
Flipinha and
Cultura.
Casa
Vocês
de
estão fazendo uma
Cultura.
festa
You're
maravilhosa.
making an
Muito
amazing
obrigada.
festival. Thank you so much.
Para mediar a mesa, eu queria
To
chamar
moderate
a
this
Nanni
roundtable, I would like to
que é
invite
uma
Nanni
livreira, e a
Rios.
gente
She is
gosta
a
muito quando
bookseller.
os livreiros
We
estão
love
por
when
aqui
booksellers are
conduzindo as
here,
conversas. A Nanni é livreira e
moderating.
curadora da
She is a
livraria
curator
Baleia de
of the
Porto Alegre.
Baleia
A
Publishing
livraria,
House
como
from
todas as
Porto
livrarias de
Alegre.
rua
Like
e de
all
bairro, muito guerreira, ela faz um
neighborhood
trabalho
publishing
belíssimo.
houses,
E eu fiquei
they are
particularmente
true
comovida
warriors.
quando
She
durante
does
as
a wonderful work.
enchentes,
During
a
the
Nanni ia
floods
narrando
in
no
Porto Alegre,
Instagram
Nanni would
todas as ações
narrate
que
on
eles estavam
Instagram all the
fazendo
different
para proteger a
contributions they were
Baleia,
doing
que
to
por um
protect
milagre não foi
Baleia, her
atingida
publishing
pela
house,
enchente,
that
porque ela
just by
ficava numa
miracle
rua muito
was not hit by
complicada,
the
mas ela
floods,
foi super
but she
solidária
was
com a Livraria da
super,
Taverna, que
she
teve quase tudo
helped the
perdido e que agora
Livraria da
está se
Taverna
reerguendo
that lost
graças à
everything,
solidariedade
and thanks to
livreira.
their solidarity
Nanni
is
Rios.
now restarting their business. Nanni Rios, thank you for being here. Welcome to the main stage. Good morning, Flip. I would like to, first of all, invite Brigitte Vasallo and Geni Núñez to join me here on stage. No, it's so nice to have a full room. Thank you so much for being here. It's wonderful to be here on this flip again. Thank you, Ana, for the invitation. Thank you to all the team.
Todos os anos. Eu vou abrir os trabalhos aqui da nossa mesa de número 14, chamada O Amor Político. Estou com duas pessoas aqui.
This is about political love. I have two people here, and it's such an honor to be here with them. I've been reading them for some time, and I admire their works, and I truly study what they do. So it's wonderful to have them here. I will briefly introduce them. Brigitte Vasallo was born in Barcelona in 1973. She is from a rural family, and she didn't have any kind of academic study. Today, she teaches in different universities where she would never be accepted. She wrote the Monogamous Mind, Polyamorous Terror at the Elefante, and she wrote Pornobuca and Sane Minds and Linguaje Inclusivo e Exclusione de Clases in the Spanish title.
Geni Núñez,
she is an activist of the Guarani nation. She has a PhD at the Federal University of Santa Catarina, where I also study, and she is member of the National Committee of Human Rights and also the Guarani Committee of Rights. You probably know her work, her essential work on Instagram, through the Geni Papos, where she talks about very inspiring topics, and we'll talk about that too. She's the author of a book called Descolonizando Afetos, and she's also launching a book here, a poetry book here in Paraty, and she also read some excerpts from her book here during this roundtable. So to kick off, I would like to ask them to introduce themselves, telling us a little bit about where they come from and where their writings begin. So it's a very interesting point to start our conversation. Yesterday, when we came together to start talking about this roundtable, Geni asked Brigitte to start because it's a welcoming gesture to Brazil, and it's such a pleasure to have her here.
Bueno, bom dia. Obrigada por estarem aqui.
Good morning. Thank you for being here. Thank you to Felipe and Elefante for making it possible, and also Nanni and Geni for having welcomed me, and also to the people of Paraty for your hospitality.
Ahora me voy al español, si me permitís.
Now I will switch into Spanish. Well, today is October 12th. This is how I will start, and I wrote this down because I want to be very precise with the words I choose. Today is October 12th. I come from Spain. I'm Spanish. I'm here in America. I'm here with Geni Núñez from the Guarani people, and with the luck and responsibility of having a microphone in my hand. So if I may, I will use this microphone and use it to ask my government and my fellow country people in Spain, the fascists, those that tolerate fascism, and there are so many, that we should start once and for all the historic reparation with reference to the American genocide. This reparation and redistribution. We have talked with our sisters. Give back the gold, give back the gold. And the gold means a lot. The epistemic gold, the emotional gold, and the material gold. Gold itself. And we have to give it back. The inheritance of the winners of the empire, we still profit from all of those golds, and today are such stolen and illegitimate as they were today, 530 years ago. All genocides are sons and daughters of all past genocides, and time heals everything. It's not true. If something is healing, that is justice. So let's claim for justice, even though years and centuries go by. So thank you. Thank you so much. Well, having said this, briefly, thank you, Geni, for inviting me here in Brazil. I am so happy. I am so happy. And I was telling her earlier, and I also want to say this publicly, and I love to say this publicly, your work is the only work about monogamous that interests me. I'm sorry if somebody's writing something that is so political that hasn't been read by me, but I don't know. But your work is, amazing. Geni Núñez, your work is something that is not a closure, it's not dogmatizing. It opens and uses non-monogamy as a tool to think the world, which is what interests me. I am doing this research of modernity in capitalist, colonial, amorous relationships, because as you, violence worries me. And what we call love is the direct cause of the direct death of 80,000 women every year. I think that this is an understatement. What we call love is in the core of all patriotism, which is in the core of all wars, which is the fuel for wars. So that word, love, we love people, it has fantastic propaganda, but it is essential to think about this. We have to open this word. We have to understand which are the guts of love. And of course, it is very significant, deeply significant, the few critical papers on love that make this immense propaganda that generates this curtain of smoke, which is the instrumentalization of what we call love. So that's me. I have introduced myself.
Acho que disse é que veio.
Certainly you said what you're here for. Geni, please.
Ciao, bom dia.
Good morning.
Bom dia.
I would like to start by thanking Flip for the invitation, for the possibility of being here with you today, all the wonderful team that supports us throughout. I would like to thank Nanni and Brigitte. My heart is overflowing with joy. And yesterday I was talking to her and I said, it's so precious to have people that will betray the colonial pact as she does. We're talking about betrayals here, and I would like to start by introducing myself and by saying that we have said in the native population movement that colonization hasn't ended, but we are still here. And my work is about this memory that we are still here, the First Nations. We are even denouncing, and I remember a relative of mine, Nedson Kayapa, he said, "Oh, that prophetized our disappearance, all those who said that we would not be here today, lost," he says. So my voice, my work, is only made possible through the collectiveness of the First Nation movements, by the struggle of our nations. And I would like to start introducing myself. Maybe some people might know this. I was chosen by my people to be a missionary that would bring the word evangelization into our communities. So I was evangelized. And I am very proud to say that, well, it didn't go their way. It all went wrong. One of the sources of my research are the Jesuit letters, and we will talk a little bit about that later. But I remember that the first historical fact that I find in my research says that the only way you can be baptized would be through your conversion into monogamy. Without baptism, all the success of the missionary work would be lost, would be compromised. And one of the rhetorics we see in the missionary letters is that the Guarani people believe that they are not sinners, and therefore it is unnecessary for them to confess, to make a confession. So I guess today here is for you to also to ask yourselves and understand, before you ask for forgiveness, make sure you agree with the sin that is being imputed. So let's move forward. I wanted to allow you to reflect a little bit.
Momento de auto-reflexão.
Yeah, self-reflection. I was thinking about my own sins. Anyways, I'm going to ask a first question. It's a self-reference, actually. When I started considering what I would like to talk to my guests, I remember once I was invited to mediate another program and Flip in 2022, and the guests were Camila Souza Vijada, a wonderful novelist, poet, essayist, the Argentinian author, and also with Luciane Parecida, also a writer of the book Mata Doce from the state of Bahia. And it was the party of the dangerous sisters. That was, so I guess this is exactly, I think everyone thinks I'm a sort of an ambulance chaser or something like that. I'm a jail hook. So today they put this in a Saturday morning, like it's an invitation for you to wake up. So this is what I understood that the curators wanted from me. I'm a jailbait, I guess. I'm also in a roundtable of the dangerous sisters. So I would like to ask them the same question I asked in 2022. What are the dangers that you offer? Why are you so risky and dangerous? Well, whatever, whoever wants to start.
Okay, I will start. And thank you so much. We are dangerous. I mean, I love it. I love it. I mean, we are so dangerous. I love it. I like it. Okay, well, I have some assumptions on why we are dangerous. What is danger, actually? And which are some disruptions that ultimately are part of the system that could look like revolutionary, but that throughout history we can realize which are the things that are kept and which not, which are disruptive, but then are back in the system again. And they follow the line of history. I am obsessed about methods, more than things, methods through which you get somewhere, you get to something. Let me give you an example, a graphic example from my context. In my context, in Europe, for instance, feminism is a topic. It's a subject. It's not a method. You can write books on feminism in a totally chauvinist, patriarchal, and colonial manner, and this is a feminist book. I mean, and sometimes I wonder, when are you going to write a feminist book? And I said, what? I mean, what are you talking about? Because I don't talk about that explicitly, because I'm not that interested in feminism as a topic. I think it is a tool when it works. And some feminists, if they work, I am not an identity follower of feminism. So I believe that the danger is the method. If we are really disruptive with the things we do and the things we build, which brings about another problem. Systems teach us how to look. They make our look immediate. And our desire is also part of what we imagine as future worlds. And we imagine this from the parameters we already know. So when we present utopias that are totally different, but are less desirable and not that sexy, that have other colors, we don't appreciate them. Because what we appreciate is an inheritance of the system. Oh, yes, yes, this is this. This is that. So there is an effort to be dangerous all the time that I believe has to do with that, how we build, which is our construction method. And I know about Geni. Do you agree with me? But I believe that in our contexts, each of us in our context, we are not people that ultimately should have a public voice. And this is important, and this is translated into other things in me. I come from a family of country people. We were illiterate when we were expelled from the countryside to the city, and we carried with a lot of shame that we were not part of the culture that won the Industrial War. We come from a different culture, a culture that exists because it was proposed. I mean, it wasn't even inferior. We were not a culture. There was a lack of culture for us in the countryside. So what is proposed to us is to mutate. I can have access to the public word, places, lying, disguising, hiding my identity, changing the tone of my voice, using words that my people will never understand, changing my body, the expression of my body. That's the price I have to pay, and that's the game that we have constantly to engage in. A game, how we bargain with that to be allowed in these spaces, conquer these spaces, but at the same time, I shouldn't forget why I wanted to get to these spaces and where I have to go back in my collective work to have the word. Remember, on who are we working for? On behalf of whom?
Thank you for your question. I was also considering how much, on the other hand, there is a certain colonial reversal that will sometimes put those who are at risk as the dangerous one. And here, I should also say how much this is a moment of celebration and joy to me, but also a moment of hurt, of death. Because every day there is a new struggle in our territory, a new loss, a new death. And this has to do with the discussion, because this violence will happen on the name of love, progress, development. So one of the contributions that we bring is maybe a certain mistrust in terms of what would be the best thing that could happen to us. So I would like to greet Mestre Bispo, who said, everything that is a straight line lies. We are deviations of a straight line together. And I guess some of you too also are deviations of us from a straight line. And also, whatever deviates, whatever fails, sometimes might be the most beautiful thing that will happen to you. So it is based on this relation between risk and dangerous is that I consider these issues. Also thinking about all of us who are part of this land, part of the territory, part of these nations. We also need this imaginary reforestation for us to allow ourselves to dream, to desire, to blossom, and to go beyond something, this in-box dream that monocultures offer us. So this is a bit the movement I participated in. And also Mestre Bispo used to say that maybe the best way to harness someone would be the one that happens in the name of love. This has an effectiveness that is greater because it is in the name of love. And I guess that some of the things I can express myself in poetry. So I'd like to share with you a poem called Impecável. This is how it goes. Everything in a straight line, everything is decided, forecasted, control. He said there was no envy. He was not a glutton. He would only swallow wrath. Sloth? Never. Lust? Not even think about it. Of fearing the fire, all his desires were frozen. And shameful of all the pride, he brought down his joys, and he was just offended by any smile. And all of us sinners that you regret, that you repudiate, we invite you to play with us in this mud bath. Well, maybe it's about time that we are not sinful, or unsinful, sorry. Before I move forward to the next question, I would like to remind you that you can also ask questions. You can submit your questions in writing. And this year, for the first time, also everyone from the main square can also submit questions. So if you're watching us from the main square, please submit your questions. And then at the end, the book that Geni has just read and other books that we'll talk about are being signed at the Flip bookstore. I forgot to say this in the beginning.
Next, now talking about their books. I am a bookseller, so I'm going to talk about books. There is a concept in Geni's book, Decolonizing Affections, which is the epistemic man of war. And I brought this book because I found a beautiful crossroads that Brigitte also made. There's a chapter in Brigitte's book quoting a sentence by another author published by the same publishing house as Brigitte's and others in Brazil. And the sentence goes, "The Lord's tools will never fall the big house." As we're talking about methods, please, Brigitte, can you comment on this chapter? And Geni, can you explain the concept of epistemic ships, epistemic man of war? Well, you've heard that Brazil was discovered. The idea of discovery is a way of mitigating the colonial violence of invasion. In my research, I noticed that even before 1500, in the papal documents, there were the following guidelines were found. Which peoples and which territories could be invaded, which peoples could be enslaved. And the answer given by the papal documents were, those where there are Christ's enemies. So the religious racism removes from our peoples the notion of being people, of being a person. So for the invaders, it wouldn't be an invasion if there weren't any people there. So the idea of discovery is used to this day, when the demarcation of territories continue with a genocidal bureaucracy of a continuous delay because we keep not being recognized as people. So this notion of discovery comes up in different manners. So what I call epistemic man of war or caravel is this gesture of finding out what was already there, giving it another name, and turning these knowledges something fashion. So the epistemic man of war happens in different ways. Another issue is that in my project, in the project of implementing monogamy in our territories, missionaries would try to find the partner, who is the person who is a partner. And they are frustrated because the same term used for this person who was a partner was also used for rivers, for mountains, for forests. So the question the missionaries would ask, do they have a soul or don't they have a soul? We say, yes, we do, but so does the river, the mountain. They are all people. In our language, there is not a word that translates human, because human is as invented as Brazil.
Audre Lorde, the tools of the master cannot put down the master's house. But I always propose to go to the source. People that haven't gone to university like me, well, I think, and I am a faculty member, I'm invited to lecture at universities where I wouldn't have been a student because I don't have a university degree. It's a paradox. But when something is not understood and something is explained, it has a different rhythm. So go to the text, go to the sources, but sometimes you take long to be able to read authors. And sometimes you need the effort to try to approach the author, and you say, I don't understand. Okay, no problem. The book is opened when the time will come. 1 year, you read a book, you don't understand. Then you go back and you read it again, and then you understand. So go back to the sources. Go back to the sources. Make an effort with some texts. Sometimes the basic key texts that you have to have your own personal idea of the text. Texts have to speak to you specifically, not mediated by other things. And in that sense, in the quotes, main quotes, Audre Lorde says, the tools of the master will not pull down the master's house, but can give us a temporary victory. And this temporary victory is also important, as Audre Lorde says. What do you mean by temporary victory? And always remember the great heroes of history. For instance, when you suffer from asthma, I have asthma. Sometimes I take a drug, super bad drug. I know it's not what I should take. I should take care of my diet. If I don't smoke, I can breathe better. But sometimes I don't do what I should do, and I take a pill, drug. When I'm in a hurry, I mean, Brigitte, eat well. I'm in a hurry. I need the temporary victory, and that's my temporary victory. And in social movements, temporary victories are also important because in my personal context, there is an arrogance. Who should say what? Which is your place where you will talk as a revolutionary person. And there is a debate in Europe with purity, sponsored by extreme right-wing movements, global extreme right-wing movements that talk about purity, that prevent us from being humble in our place of speaking. And this brings me back to the tools of the master, and the method is important. And there's an example that I don't quote in my book, but in other topics, that is the thread that is knitting and weaving. I have a thread of ideas that I understand afterwards, not while I'm writing. I understand that there is a thread afterwards. I work with inclusive language from a class perspective. And I think that this has taught me a lot about methods, because when we speak about the language and the languages we have, and the languages we speak are the languages that were imposed by the master. And in that sense, this has been very revealing. And it goes together with the indigenous peoples in Mexico, Mije peoples. When we want a different language, we need to create new words. And I think it is important now, in the times we live, to think about the words we will create. Why? Because if we create using the tools of the master, the academic languages, the languages of elites, the learned, quote-unquote, languages opposed to unlearned languages, people that our peoples don't understand. Weird words. Yes, can we translate it? Weird. I mean, with thousands of syllables. I mean, they're so long. long. They have so many syllables, you don't know how to pronounce them and how to use them. But when you use these words, you feel so learned. And when you don't use them, you feel like less. So this has been imposed by masters. So how can we detach from that and move forward and in turn look and think about these temporary victories and collective victories, because we have to walk the path while we walk it.
Very interesting. We've also been talking about the power of being in a place where nobody would ever think we would be. And that's where the work of these two people is born. So I'm going to be disobedient again in our conversation, which Geni explores very well in her book. In her research, I was amazed when I read that Geni's object of research was the Jesuit letters. That's where she found out how sexuality occurred among the indigenous peoples. It was by surprising the missionaries, everything that was considered wrong. And the first sin was being nomadic. Because when we are moving, it's more difficult to find us, to capture us. So I'd like to ask Geni to comment on this finding she found in her research. Eventually, you will come out of here with a toolbox. So I hope you can use it. We will also talk about identities. Geni or Brigitte also speaks about this. When we have very stiff identities, we cannot articulate them. So we need to remove the stiffness of identity. Can you please comment on these very complex concepts? I joined university, and one of the piece of advice I received from our leadership was from a leader who said the following: if the non-indigenous peoples who have been researching our peoples for many years call themselves indigenous, so we will join universities to be whitish experts, white people experts, so to speak. If they are indigenous people experts, we are white people experts. And we use words, and as our wonderful leader said yesterday, Chai Suri, we are in a collective, and in this hunt for words, I'm going after these people. Because the lies they told about us interfere on our territory, on our way of being in the world to this day. So let me explain the time landmark. The time landmark, as we call it, is a thesis that states that only the peoples that were in that territory at the time of the Constitution of 1988. This thesis of the temporal landmarks is a continuity of the sin of being nomadic. The idea that we should be fixed in time, in space, in the way how we are in the world. In Brazil, when we speak about monogamy, we think about this definition, the people who relate with only one person. And when I perceived from my research was that if monogamy means one marriage, today most adult people have had more than one sexual affective relationship. So it's no longer mono, it's no longer one. So what persists, what stays from this logic? The difficulty to deal with concomitant relationships. And it's the binarism that gives sense to these in the monocultures of faith, sexuality, and affections. So when the missionaries impose monogamy in our territory, it's not only about being able to have only one sexual relationship, it's also about the time of the relationship. There is a letter from 1633 from a missionary that says the following: these Guarani people live together for as long as they want. And that's what bothers him. A different way of dealing with time that maintains its finality in eternity. I remember a famous verse from a song that says, "I know I'm going to love you till the end of my life." You don't know. But the promise is always of the future, of rigidity and immutability. So thinking about different ways of existing, thinking about nomadic peoples. Some anthropologists call our peoples nomadic. And we understand that the earth is a person and it needs to rest as people do. So we have to understand that movement is life's DNA. Without movement, there is no Guarani. So we struggle to keep moving and also to say that the colonial violence is not about wanting one, but wanting one destroying the rest. So there are stickers that say, "God is faithful." This is a wonderful example of fidelity. People speak about free will, but you are free to choose as long as you agree. Otherwise, you are condemned. That's it.
Well, yesterday we ate something together to prepare this talk together, and Geni said something and I couldn't even go to sleep. I mean, my head was exploding. Today in breakfast I was writing because the first sin was that they were nomads explains so much. Think about gender, the established, the fixed gender. Think about our ideas. Because there's something that's a concern we all have, and I think that we share, how these modern war systems of all the daily wars we live, how do they capture our emancipation ideas? They capture these ideas so fast. I mean, when you're building and constructing a small space of oxygen, someone comes and captures and destroys your idea in many, many ways. One of the ideas is capturing your idea, as with monogamous, polyamorous love. Everywhere in the magazines, it was a scandal, more of the same, all of these captures of polyamorous love. And of course, we're mourning when we have these utopias that we create with such hard work, ripping off ourselves to dare dream in other ways when they're captured, and we don't even realize and become just another commercial product deprived of its political vigor and strength. And of course, we're mourning. And of course, we need to move. We need to be flexible. And if you have to let it go, just let it go. And if we have to build it again, build it again. This does not belong to us. Once that you have lived these little moments in which you feel that the world could be something else, I don't know, know if you ever felt it. You have this, and this has to do with communities, because we have been taught in modernity, colonial, capitalist environments, the individualist individuality, because we have to be the same. We can't be different. Individualism, I mean, I am special because I'm individual. It's a total lie. I have to be identical to what I should be identical to. And this makes us think about ourselves and each single one of us as a hero with our ego. I am the revolutionary hero. But no. Then you will get to the system, and in a couple of years, Geni and me will be doing God knows what, and maybe we'll be advertising a brand of clothing. Maybe that's ultimately what's going to happen with you and me, Geni. But the world is a collective thing. It does not depend on one person. And this is part of us for a moment, and then we are not there anymore. And this is what we capture. And this is what the idea of how dangerous it is to be nomad. And power, I mean, being nomad, of course, I clearly understand, as everybody here, we are very concerned about the reappearance of the extreme right-wing movements. I mean, but sometimes they appear and then they disappear and they come again and interrupt our paths. And what's going on in my context, and in my context that has to do with extreme right-wing movements, and language shows this in a very graphical way, and with monogamy as well. The extreme right has a very strict, hierarchical and closed thought. If extreme right-wing say red, I don't know if reds or red has any meaning. I'm not saying this with a second meaning. I mean red. And we say blue, 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 blue. Red, red, red. Blue, blue, blue. But red and blue, I mean, they're colors. They belong to the same world. And we are being rigid. We are opposing rigid thought to the rigid thought. With the universal and the universalizing masculine gender, we propose an E, an at, an X. In my context, we're all arguing at is not better or worse than anything else for an inclusive language, but it's all part of the same word. If all of these options that we want to be emancipating, liberating, we're talking about dogma, another grammar, another universal. Why do we want this? We have one already. Should we waste so much time and energy on this? And then going back to monogamy, just as a comment, according to my analysis, thinking about what we should think is that a couple shouldn't be a couple of two. This is how this story has been sold. But when you do the math, it doesn't work. It doesn't work. One of the things that I learned with Islam feminists is a tool that is very useful and interesting is to do archaeology of words. The Quran text has revealed that you can work with the reading of the word in their historical, geographical, and temporal context. And when you study this, very interesting things appear. So what I did with the concept of monogamy and many other things that anthropology proposed as polygamy. In the Spanish state, we have Muslim population, Muslim kingdoms for 800 years. A lot of historical coexistence between Muslim and Christianity. The last battle to expel the Muslim it's another genocide. It was January the 2nd of 1492 in Grenada, 1492. And in medieval texts, the word polygamy does not appear. There is another word that refers to the Quran that is tadut fis awan. It's multiple marriages. So this quote does not talk about how many people are involved in the relationship, but from my perspective is the place that this structure occupies within the context of society. The structure, couple. The couple as it may be, and at the same time, what is the place it occupies, and which is this unique place it occupies, which is what worries us when we talk about monogamy. I'm not worried about having a couple, having marriages. I'm concerned when marriages are only available for part of the population. That makes me mad, but I'm not worried about marriages. But what worries me is that there are not other support structures, because we can't have them, because the ones we had before have been dismantled to push us, to force us with persecutions, laws, borders, genocides, everything. State structures make us have the only shelter is the couple. This very tiny couple, detached from community, detached from all of the support and tenderness bonds.
Quero ver agora vocês dormirem.
I want to see you guys go to bed after this round table. Well, the next topic here, I didn't propose this. We all talked about this. I'm not the one who's provoking, but I want to talk about family. Family is something that really moves me. I was watching the previous roundtables, and I was listening to the one with Leonora Miano and Eliana Alves Cruz. I guess it was, Thursday? So not only because of their wonderful words about love, it was really moving, but also we talked about family and how so many issues of the enslavement and how family is a central topic of what was done with the unit family and the meaning it has for the enslaved population, both there as well as here. And I would like to ask them, because both of them bring this whole issue in their books and their works, that for the First Nations, the whole idea of relatives is important. Who are your relatives? There's a great symbolism in that. And also, Brigitte talks in her book about the different way to live in their families as a queer person. Who are we referring to when we say that family is everything, family is the most important thing, or when we say do away with family because it is a melting pot of violence? So when you think about destroying or building structures, we have to look about the ruins that are going to be left behind. And sometimes just a way of having another approach, another way of seeing a point of view. So please, let's think about this whole difficulty of what is a family, so essential, such a basis and fundamental for the patriarchal system, the racist system, the capitalist system above all, which is what we are trying to destroy here in order to better consider our own tools and methods. I was considering this question when I was listening to you speak. There is truly some advertisement that, well, actually these structures would be in terms of well-being and love. So we say, oh, there was a violence in the family, exactly in a place that would be a welcoming, well-being, support kind of environment. So this kind of rhetoric allows me to believe that actually the true family is about love, well-being, support, and this is the first point I would like to highlight. No, I'm a bit suspicious of that whole idea. One of etymologies of the word family will come from famulus, from the word in Latin, which would be the owner of enslaved people. So if we look into these structures in depth, we can see that the exception is not that when you don't have violence or equity, when you do have equity, it is the standard, the norm. Something that in my research and by also listening to elders is that men and women are only possible to be called a man or a woman if before they were understood as humans. So our ancestors were not branded as a man or a woman, but animals, those that had not yet become human. So the word human will say less about a neutral description of reality and more about this project. So the words man and woman, which are a result of the civilizatory process, are impregnated by the heteronorm. In our context here, at least, one of the first things that someone hears when they leave heterosexuality behind is that, well, that's not a true man. He's a faggot, or she's a dyke. It's all these systems and these words that we borrow from other cultures. And that one that I really like, that it's said that a person who is effeminate is a fruit, a tiny fruit. Frutinha in Portuguese. It said frutinha, which would be a small fruit, or a fruit cake would be maybe an English translation. I would like to conclude, and I would like to also hear what Brigitte has to say. I would like to tell you about my personal experience with regards to this matter. When I left church, the evangelical church, or the Christian church, one of my difficulties would be how my family reacted to the fact that I was not heterosexual. I was afraid of being expelled or suffer some kind of violence. And when I told my mother, she said something that I'm always moved when I remember. She said, I don't want to go into a heaven in which you would not be welcome. And I will read you an excerpt of that. So it is, this poem is for my mother. It says, Nós também somos o céu. We are also the heavens. The sky is also the land. It's part of it. It rains here on me, on us. When the drops will hydrate the leaves, there's a little bit of heavens in there. When the flowers and fruits blossom, there's a bit of rain in them. And in every rain, there's a little bit of a river. In every river, there's a little bit of a sky. You know, the sky is not a paradise, or the earth is hell. I don't want to go to heaven because we already are the heavens or the skies. It's the same word in Portuguese for heaven and sky, céu, or the same meaning of the word.
Geni, I'm so moved. And I will tell you a story. I will tell you a personal story about families. When you write from ourselves, well, I mean, it has several layers. But in my case, I'm from the European culture, and apart from this European feminism, I mean, I don't feel my ego, my identity is feminist, but I come from a feminist that is colonial, imperial, that doesn't recognize or include all of these processes. So when we write from our personal history, I have the hope that this will protect me from temptation of universality, to go back to what ultimately is my life. I was in Italy, I was in Florence, in a working class literary festival, which is actually a working class literary festival. It's the longest occupation in history in Italy, the occupation of a factory in Italy. And these blue-collar workers, female workers and masculine workers, they are writers. They're writers like me, like you, like everyone. And a brother mentioned something: I don't write to be above the rest, but to meet the rest. So there is an autobiography trying to reason this possibility to feel less alone. So when we talk about families, and I insist on methods because this is what I have in my face, and when we talk about power, it is a relational power. It is not a trophy I have. It has to do with a relationship I have with somebody. So it is very important to remember that this is the case, especially when, at least in my context, it is being used in a very interesting way and a very dangerous way, victimization. We see that part of feminism is victimizing itself with reference to trans women. That's a problem. We should be scared of this, but they victimize themselves. And what the system is asking us to point towards, not where we should, but to the easy places where we can exert power from feeling victims. It is a triangle of relationships that is important. We should see them and we should deactivate this, see this, and always ask ourselves, we are subdued with reference to whom? We are secondary with reference to whom? We can be secondary or subdued and generate violence. And in this sense, and the topic is not a thing, it's a method. Criticism to family and the vindication of family is possible because they come from different historical contexts. So, from those places where a family is imposed as a closed group, the Catholic family, the father of the family, the only group which is isolated, the emancipation is not to destroy family, but to create other families. I don't want to destroy anything. It creates so much dust, and your knees are worn out in destruction. Let's just construct and build other spaces. It's what you said about the ruins. I mean, yes, okay, we destroy families, but who will take care of ourselves if we don't have a family? I was expelled from my family myself. But I mean, let's not destroy, let's build something else. So in these contexts where we are invited other populations that have a different family, this is a vindication as reproductive rights, the right to your own body, the right to abortion, the right of not being sterilized. In Europe, there have been forced sterilization of native communities, racialized women, white women with mental health disorders, of alcoholism disorders in places such as Sweden that has such great press in Europe. So we have all of these issues. And when we talk about what is personal violence, in my case, there has been a lot of violence. I talked about this publicly. I was in the middle of a violent father and a mother with personality disorders. She had, my mother, my family, had to leave the countryside and migrated to France. That's why I'm called Brigitte, and migrated to a city in Catalonia. And sometimes I cling to some burning wires. Maybe it is the diaspora. It could have been easy, but this is an open wound I cling to. And in the city, we were totally isolated. We lived in a small apartment, my mom, my dad, myself. There was nowhere to go and ask for help. Our neighbors were unknown. There was nobody in the street. If we had been in our city, in our countryside town, we had the neighbors, and the line between who's family and who's not family is not separated. In my community, in my hometown, I could have gone to my neighbors, I could have gone to anybody's house, and I could have found a hiding place to hide from the violence of my father. So when we talk about the violence, what we understand is community, how we understand a community within a family, what do we want to break, and what is our proposal?
We are reaching the end of this roundtable. Yes, I'm sorry. I saw that we're running out of time. And there are a couple of questions that were addressed by the audience. They're simple. They're very similar. So there's here an issue about the curiosities of what we are talking about here. And I would like to ask both of you, how can we name our loves as part of our affection network? Can we use different words that are not as colonial, or is it necessary for a non-monogamic debate? Another question, do you have a suggestion on how to name the non-monogamy in another way that we just make a reference to sexual or affection? I guess people understood that things are broader than that. It's about name, it's about naming, it's about language and words. How can we name things in a different way?
¿Quieres? Sí, por favor.
Wow. Briefly, from my perspective, to name is to put in context. I don't know what you feel, Geni. I'll talk about myself. If I had the answer, well, my answer does not work if I said, this is what you have to say, and if I gave you the word without not even knowing who's asking the question, I mean, what world are we talking about? Everything we've said has served no one. We have to start all over again. I believe that my social role, if any, as somebody that is a thinker, a researcher, a writer, is to ask complex questions, give you complex questions, but then the solution, the answer of those questions are collective and multiple because they come from context. If this world we're proposing will be reflected in different worlds, it is contextual. And at the same time, when you name, I don't know, here in Brazil, when you talk about your other context, I don't know if what I say has a meaning, but in my context, we say is that what you do not name does not exist. Does this work? I mean, watch out. If you name, you're not creating reality. If you don't name it, maybe it will not exist in the plane of dialogue, but all of those silences that we have suffered that haven't been named, haven't they existed? Of course they have. They exist beyond language, beyond this. The real canon of language goes beyond naming, and it is a mechanism that we have to observe. And thank you so much for the person that asked the question.
This question makes a lot of sense to me, and everything you said. Now, going back to other questions, something that inspires me is to think about what relationships we're talking about. Except from the family concept where we have grandparents, grandchildren, uncles, father, there is a division between love and friendship that is often informed by the centrality of sex. So love is people where you have sexual relationships and so on. But we know that, in fact, people's lives go much beyond that. So there are sexual relationships between friends, and sometimes there are not in couples. And this is a question I have. In my research, in my activism, what I find is that the great obsession of colonization is around sexuality. What you did, what you did not do, what you failed to do, with whom. Yesterday we were talking about the fake news that were created about us. And there is some fantasy. Let me tell you very briefly an example. The other day... No, I'm not going to tell what you told me. Don't worry. I'm not going to be the gossiper of Flip. The other day they asked me, someone asked me, you non-monogamous people live...
E aí, dependendo do dia, eu sou mais pedagógica. Eu falo, isso não é sobre quantidade, tudo aquilo.
You live daily orgies. And I said, yes, that's how I answered.
Eu penso que virar a pergunta também é interessante.
And turning the question around is also interesting. In Brazil, there are a few non-monogamous groups that use the word affection as a substitute term to boyfriend or spouse, girlfriend. And please excuse my irony, but can you imagine the scene of the ritual of marriage? By the way, it's amazing the fact that there are witnesses watching what you promise. And imagine if in this scene, instead of saying, I declare you husband and wife, which is very common, they say, I declare you affections. The ritual continues. The scene, the organization is just the same, because I never heard anyone say, this is my grandmother, my affection. Because we use affection as the same place as naming sexual affective relationships. So I don't have many answers either, but I like to think about the need that comes up, not to name, because naming, well, we are writers, poets, activists. The gesture of naming is wonderful. However, we have to think, what is the motivation of the naming gesture? Why this nomination and not the other? In what way this will flourish or not? So personally, one term I like to use in Brazil, when somebody divorces, people say she's the former wife, for example. And in the sense of the missionaries, that the wife, well, in Brazil, the term is woman. A married woman is called woman. And if she's no longer married, she's no longer a woman. As I'd rather be a Guarani than a husband or wife, so I say I'm a former woman or former wife. Well, our time is up. But I'd like to have one more minute to read one paragraph of Brigitte's book in a chapter called Polyamorous Terror. Polyamorous terror is what we feel in our stomach when addressing the issue. It's the fear we will have no ground under our feet in the space where we deposit our survival wish. Polyamorous terror is the alarm that fires when we address the issue. The answers given in any TV debate or any conversation, the fear of bringing down the only home where we can go back to. Polyamorous terror is the fear of not having anyone to organize life with. All these fears are real, and the world set up for and by the couple. Any other life option is a constant vertigo. But polyamorous terror is also the desire of making this vertigo into a terrorist movement, a threat to the foundation of the capitalist relationships, of the monogamous system, the class privileges, resisting against tide and wind, in a marriage that requires a focal change to disappear, just as the darkness disappears when we light up a match. However, we need this match.